Hi, everybody. I'm Marcus Blankenship, and I'm really excited about today's show. I've got John Sonmez with me, and we're going to be talking about how to create your own personal brand. What is a personal brand, and why would you want to do that anyway? So, my apologies. We're a few minutes late getting started. John, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely, really excited. So, John, we promised people that we would talk about this thing called a personal brand. We're going to get to that. But first, tell us about yourself. How did you come to even be an expert on this? Just kind of give us the background.
Sure. So I'm currently consider myself a life coach for software developers. So what that means is I basically teach kind of the soft skills, the things that would be non-technical skills for software developers, and I do that it's through some personal coaching, but mainly now through the kind of things that I produce from my blog to podcasts to YouTube videos and courses that I put out. And so I got into this after I was a developer for about 15 years. I still technically am a developer, though I don't write as much code now anymore. But I basically found in my career a couple of things. One thing was that a lot of what I was doing was teaching and mentoring, and I really enjoyed that part. And then the other thing that I found was that as I started getting more successful in my career, some of the things that really skyrocketed my career and really boosted me up were some unintentional things that I stumbled into, which was basically what I consider now marketing yourself. My blog, which was just something that I had started, just to express some of my ideas, turned out to be one of the best things that I ever did for my career, and it led to all kinds of opportunities. So along that path, I came to this realization that there's no one really out there that's teaching developers soft skills. Whenever I would talk about this topic, people would be extremely interested in it. And then also, I found just from my own experience, I realized that learning to market myself, which is one of the soft skills that I talk about a lot, was something that just benefited me to a huge degree. I'd never heard of it before. Like I didn't know anything about it. Couldn't find any information about it. And so I decided that I would start helping developers to realize this, to see that maybe the things that took me a few years to do, that I could short circuit that for other developers. So that's kind of my background and story, and that's how I came into this. And I really like to help. I've always been inspired by people like Tony Robbins and different motivational speakers that really help people. And so that's something that I'm excited to wake up in the morning to do every day.
Now, it seems like, I was a developer for years and a development manager, and honestly, marketing was like the last thing that I felt like I could ever be good at. In fact, it was sort of the antithesis in my mind of like what a developer is. You've got the math guys, the developers over here, and then you've got the guys who wear hair gel and whose socks match, and maybe we would call those marketers, or the cool kids in high school. Like, what benefits would I as a developer get from wanting to market myself?
So there's a few things. So first, kind of to lay the groundwork, right? I kind of, in this space, I kind of mix marketing and sales. They're not quite the same thing, but let's just say that we all market ourselves, we all sell ourselves, right? If you have an idea and you speak to a coworker about that idea and you're trying to convince someone of your idea, you're basically marketing that idea. You're selling that idea, right? If you go to a job interview, you're marketing your skills, and a resume is a marketing pamphlet. It's an ad for you, right? So we're already doing this, right? It's just a lot of us aren't doing it consciously, and a lot of us are doing it poorly. So I think that's where it starts, is to realize that yes, we're already doing this. We're just not aware of what we're doing. Then it comes to, now, why would you do this? Well, it comes to those same kind of reasons why we're doing what we're already doing. So let's take your resume, for example. Like, why would you want to? Why do you create a resume? That's technically a marketing activity.
It is.
It's to be able to get a job, right? To be able to get a good job, a better job, right? If you have a good resume, higher paying. Why do you try to convince your coworkers of your ideas? Because it helps you in your career, it helps you to get to have the right thing done in your work, right? So there's those basic benefits, but then we could take it to another level here and say, one example that I always like to use is, if you've ever been to like a dive bar and you've heard some band play, cover band play, and they play some. I've been multiple times where I was like, man, they're better than the original artists. Like these guys are like, how are these guys not on MTV or whatever, And the answer to that question, as I looked at other professions like celebrity chefs and even celebrity judges on TV, things like that, is the answer to that question is not the skill part. It's the marketing part. What it does is, a really good way to think about this, regardless of what career field or profession you're in, is this idea that marketing is essentially a multiplier to skill. So if you have skill and you apply marketing to it, what ends up happening is that's a multiplier for the amount of money that you make or the success that you have. And so, if you go back to that example of a cover band and a rock star, right, the difference between the two is probably not skill. They're probably, you can find plenty of unknown people who are extremely, extremely talented, but they don't have the marketing. Whereas a rock star might actually even have less talent, but they have a name. They built out a reputation. And because of that, they're able to make a lot more money. And so if we take this all the way back to developers, why should developers care about this? Is because I'm not saying that you have to be necessarily a rock star as a software developer, but if you build up a name, if you have some kind of marketing, it's going to multiply your income. A lot of developers hit what I call the glass ceiling, where their income is sort of capped, and they're like, well, how do I get past this amount? How do I make more money? How do I go to the next step in my career? And the answer is not increasing your skills. It's really most likely going to be building a name, building a brand, a reputation online.
So you say you don't have to be a rock star. Now, does that mean you don't have to be very good at what you do? I mean, is the skill part important? And I think back to people I've worked with who maybe they rose into management, or maybe they had this really good reputation, but when I interacted with them as a software engineer, I thought, oh, they're just all polish, they're all talk and no action or something. Maybe I can just substitute marketing for being good at my job. Is that true?
So I think that's the kind of marketing that we all hate, right?
Right.
That's, if you go back to the Middle Ages, those people would be called charlatans and
snake oil salesmen.
Exactly,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's funny that we actually sell snake oil today, but I won't get into that. And that's gotten popular. It's actually oil that's being sold as, but I won't get into that.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is that if you have style without substance, you're a fraud. That's
right.
It's a fraud. So you have to have skill, right? But let's say that I guess one example I'd say is, like, if let's say you're at the 80% level of skill in some area, right? It might take you years to take that up to the 90%. It might be, but it's a margin of difference, a small margin for the effectiveness. You're already pretty darn effective. So at that point, marketing is probably going to benefit you more in your career and allow you to reach more and help more people than increasing that skill, especially like if you're at the 95% skill level, and then it's like, well, do you want to spend all this time and effort to get to the 97 percentile or whatever it is? That I'm not saying that there's not any value in that, but probably, like, when you allocate your time and you think about the cost of your time, it's probably better to be spent in building a brand and reputation for the value of that time. So I guess I boil it down to, you got to have both, but
Okay.
The proportion is what matters, I think.
But don't I have to be like, okay, so when I think about, if I'm going to market myself, don't I have to be like the best in the world? I mean, isn't like this celebrity chefs, like what you're saying is, it's actually not important that I be better than anyone else at it. That's not the key thing that's going to get me money or jobs. It's not about being the very, very better than anybody else. That's not, I'm thinking about it wrong if that's the way I'm imagining the world works.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not about the best. It really honestly isn't. I mean, even just just to go back to the music example, maybe this is a poor example because it's a little bit fraudulent. But when you think about it, like I think I saw this video of I think it was Britney Spears without auto tune, or and it was like she's not very good singer. That was the thing, and there's a lot of musicians like that. I'm sure that's a little bit more on the fraud side, but it kind of proves a point. It's like you don't have to be the best. Now, and there's a couple of reasons for that, right? And I'm not saying that you should be a fraud. What I'm saying is that part of it is, well, for example, like a lot of the things that I do, I'm not the best at, but I have different attributes, right? I can come across with a different personality, right? I can teach a subject to make it interesting, and that's like an asset that I have, right? Different people are going to relate to me, even as a beginner, right? Beginners are going to have an advantage in teaching something because they relate to other beginners, or people want to follow your journey. Whatever it is, what ends up happening is that people think, oh, they're not good enough, they're not the best, so they don't build a brand, they don't put themselves out there. Meanwhile, the guy who is the best, the guy who's like the 99 percentile best Java developer you ever seen in your life, he's sitting in a basement somewhere cracking out code, and no one knows that he exists. just the one employer, right, who happens to have this gold, this treasure, but it doesn't do him any good,
and he
it
probably
really
doesn't appreciate the guy either, right?
Exactly.
The guy's not like comparing himself or selling or teaching. He's just down here like, they don't, and I run into so many devs who are just like, they don't even know how good I am, sort of that Office Space mentality of they don't even know how good they've got it, but then they don't do anything with it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So, one of the things, I feel like there would be a lot of fear, and maybe I'm wrong, like I'm not a celebrity, but I know when I started doing interviews, the first thing I asked myself was like, I felt internally was like, who am I to talk to famous people like John, right? Why would John ever talk to me? And why would John ever, why would anybody subscribe to my list? I feel imposter, right? And I hear this phrase, imposter syndrome. How do we get over that feeling that we can actually do this, that we're not a liar, that we're not fraudulent somehow?
So this is where I really like to use the phrase, fake it till you make it. And sometimes I'll call this act as if. Act as if you already achieved the result. Act as if you already are who you want to be. Act as if success was already achieved, right? When you think about this, right, it's not fraudulent. What it is it's projecting forward into the future. To know that, if you continue down a path and if you're determined, you will reach success. So you can already act as if that success was already achieved, or as if you've already become the thing you want to become. And that's really the basis. Once I realized that in my career, like it clicked for me, right? Because I felt the same way, right? I felt fraudulent. I was like, I now a lot of people whose magazine articles or books I read, now I consider them my peers. And before I was like, wow, how could I felt like they're so much higher above me. And then I started acting as if I knew what I wanted to become, and I started acting like I was that already. The kind of fake it till you make it attitude, and I eventually became what I wanted to become. And I think that's really the only way that we ever transform in life. To be honest, there's a really good book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and in that book, the author Maxwell Maltz, he talks about this idea of your self-image. It's one of the first self-help books, and he talks about this idea that you can never trick your self-image. So you can't go beyond what your self-image says that you are. So if you want to become a thing, you have to alter your self-image, and then you can't be untrue to that self-image. So I think that's a kind of a real powerful concept. That's why I like that. Fake it till you make it, act as if, because that helps you to alter that self-image, and then you kind of step into the shoes that you want to be in. And for most people, that's really the only way that they ever change. If you think about like losing weight is a good one, right? Or some kind of diet. Like someone doesn't go on a diet and become successful. The people who become successful are the ones who start thinking about themselves as a healthy person, as someone who is already healthy, and then so they start acting like someone who is a healthy person, right? And so I think that's really the key, is like you have that thing, you project who you want to be, and then you start just playing the role. We're all actors on a stage. You start playing the role that you're supposed to play to be the person that you want to be.
I think there's a Rush song in there somewhere. Limelight maybe is showing my age, but having just gone through the process of in the last year losing about 80 pounds, that weight thing really resonated with me because while at first I went on this thing called a diet, that's not worked for me for 40 years in any sustainable way, and so I like the way you say it. I did start thinking like somebody who I acted like what would a healthy person, what would a thin person do, a thinner person do, and that mindset change kind of changed my behavior more powerfully than anything else.
Yeah.
That said, let's just be honest though, right? Like when you started, it's easy to say, but it's pretty hard to do, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, sometimes I still feel like a fraud, right, or an imposter, right? The imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that where I am now, I would not have predicted in 5 years, and that I will be where I'm aiming in the future. And so I have that confidence because it's kind of like when you first you take these steps, right? And most people live in this very sheltered life where they're very much stuck in the path. And they just like follow the rules. I got to go to school, get a good job, get good grades, all this stuff, pay my taxes, and they never like think outside of that box. They never take these risks or step outside or think of what they could become. Once you start doing that and you start having success, then you start to get confidence in your ability to do that. So then you're able to take these risks, and you're like, man, hey, whatever happens, I'm going to just go and do this thing, and I might fail, that's fine, but I'll eventually bumble my way through it and make it through the other end. Like I'll eventually get there. Once you start to have that confidence, and it's not a confidence in a specific ability, but just in the ability to step into the unknown and eventually succeed at that, then you build that up little by little. You start off and you take a small step and you say, okay, I'm going to try this bold thing. I'm going to write. For a lot of people, a lot of developers, writing a blog post and putting it out there on the internet for people to comment on and see how dumb you are or how bad your writing is, that's a hard step. But you take that one step and then you're like, wow, okay, I did this, I could do that. And then maybe you do the next thing and then the next thing, and you take bolder and bigger steps, and you're building that confidence in your ability to to transform reality to what you want it to be. And then pretty soon you really become unstoppable.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got people here who clearly are interested in taking these steps. What advice would you give them to start? So if I'm the Java guy in the basement and I recognize that I want a life that's different, and I've already got the skill, and that skill is not going to get me where I want to go, that I have to begin to present myself more boldly to the world, right?
Right.
Where do I begin?
So for most developers, I recommend starting a blog. Right?
Starting a blog. Okay.
Yeah, this is a real simple step that can be done. As developers, you've got the technology. Like, it shouldn't be any problem to get a blog up and running. Right? There's a lot of alternatives. I have a free email course. If you go to simpleprogrammer.com, you'll see the pop-up, and you can take my course, and it'll teach you how to do it in 3 weeks. But that's a good place, I think, because that allows you to start building up a brand and some recognition, and to start putting your ideas out there. It also, it's one of those nice things, like it'll benefit you really quickly. Like if you can write a blog post, commit to writing a blog post every week, the next time that you go for a job interview, right, someone Googles your name, hopefully your blog should probably come up in the first result. They look at that, that's going to be way better than a 30-minute interview, right? They're going to be able to read through your stuff and say, oh, I can see your code examples, I can see how you think, I can see that you're passionate about this, that you understand these ideas, right? That's when I try to interview a developer and I Google their name and I see their blog and I go through that, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so easy. Like I don't have any fear in hiring this person because they get it, they understand. Like you can't pull off a fraud of this scale, right? You can't write 15 blog posts of BS, or if you could, I could tell it right there.
Right.
So that's a big benefit.
If you're thinking about hiring that person and you find their blog and you like their writing, as you said, it's going to be so easy. It sounds like there's a reduction even risk in your mind in bringing that person onto the project because you already have an insight into them, something that the interview is supposed to provide. Does that mean that would you be more inclined to pay that person a higher wage because there was a lower risk about bringing them onto the project? I mean, is there an equivalence with the money as you start to explore who they are?
Oh yeah, I definitely. I think there's a couple of things here. One of them is that, when you hire someone, the biggest risk for anyone hiring a developer is, having sat on both ends of the table, is really, can this person actually write code, right? I mean, how many developers like apply for a job and they can't actually write code? Like, they
Right.
seem to understand it, but you don't know if they can really do this. So and then if you hire that person, there's that thing, the 10x developer. I think that it's actually what it is that there's, like, I don't know if there's a 10x developer, but I know that there's a negative 10x developer.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly. I like that.
the game is avoiding the negative. Like, I'd rather throw away, like, if I'm unsure about a person, I'd rather throw them out because I don't want to take that, get stuck with the hot potato of the person who actually negates 5 other members on my team because they actually undo work, because they cause problems, because they make so there's that aspect of it, right? And so if you can have that confidence, right, from a hiring manager's perspective of a developer who can write code and who can write good code and who understands things, you're going to want to pay them more because you're going to want to get that person and keep that person. And also, here's the other thing, right? If I see that someone is blogging, right, and they're teaching the world, right, they're sharing their information, that's probably okay. So the most valuable person I could possibly hire, or, well, let's go backwards. The least valuable person I could possibly hire on my team is that negative 10x developer who doesn't know how to code, who actually messes things up and causes more harm than good. But the best possible person I could hire is the opposite of that. It's someone who maybe their skills are not 10x better, but they teach other people. They bring up the level of proficiency of everyone else on my team.
So they're a force multiplier to the whole group.
Exactly. So when I see a good blog, I know, hey, this person teaches. This could be a benefit. It's not just the work they produce. Now they could up the skill level of everyone on my team. This is a good thing.
And I know that as a software developer and as a manager, like, it's not just about writing code, it's actually about writing English. It's about writing human readable things. And it seems like if I can go out to somebody's blog and see that they've written 20 articles that make sense, that are logical and coherent, that they probably have a pretty good chance of interacting with marketing or sales or the client or whatever other humans that or even other programmers, right, that they have to write for.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point too. Just writing in general. I was I'm in the process of hiring an editor for my blog, and I was just talking with this one girl that I was thinking about hiring, and she said, oh, whenever I'm vetting a writer, I want to talk to them first and see what their communication skills are, because if someone's a good writer, they're probably a good communicator. And that's a really interesting connection, because I found that to be true as well. Like, it's another side benefit besides marketing yourself is if you're writing, you start to be able to organize your thoughts better, and you're able to communicate better. And when you can communicate better, well, most developers know that our job is to communicate with our boss, with coworkers, with the business, right? Understanding and communicating your ideas and then communicate them in code is a very, very valuable skill. So there's another benefit there as well.
So people, let's say Bob, the basement Bob, we'll call him, right? Or Java Jim, or whatever we're going to call him. But he writes his blog, and he starts and he commits. He writes an article a week. He writes 1,000 words, and they're brilliant. They're shining pieces of brilliance, and nobody reads it. Like, isn't that is that common? I mean, of course it is, right? The internet's a huge place, and there's 1,000, 10,000 Bobs out there writing.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who say, well, I've got a blog and I have 0 visits? What I guess it's a failed thing. Should I just shut it down?
Well, okay. So this is a really interesting. This is where where you got to put the pedal to the metal, so to speak, right? This is where it gets tough. So this is actually a good thing, right? If you can be consistent and persistent, these are two things that most people lack. Consistency and persistency are very rare. And that's a good thing if you can have those attributes, if you can force yourself to be those things. And I'll tell you why. Because at the beginning of the race, right, if we think of this as a race, there's a lot of people at the starting line, right? I've never run a full marathon myself, but I would guess that a lot of people drop out. They don't make it, or they start walking, or they give up, right? So especially if it were like a really tough uphill race or whatever. But anyway, you can visualize it as at the beginning of at the starting line, everyone's there. There's a lot of crowd, there's a lot of competition. But as you get around to like mile 20, all of a sudden, where did everyone go? Right? There's no more competition. Yeah. It's easy, right? So my point in it being is saying, yeah, everyone starts a blog, right? And then they write a couple of blog posts, and then whatever. They don't get any traffic, and they give up. Okay, fine. You're competing with all those other people who started a blog and wrote 3 blog posts. But how many people start a blog and write a blog post every week for a year? That number dwindles quite a bit, right?
So that's the persistence and consistency at play here. Like, even though I'm not going into Google Analytics and feeling warm and fuzzy inside, I'm committing to something.
Exactly. And there's this this convex curve to this. It's not a linear function, right? It's an exponential function. So the people that are waiting for this linear function, they drop out, and they're like, they don't make it the year of blogging or whatever, or the time that it takes. Same thing happens in entrepreneurship and small businesses, bootstrap businesses. But this idea that if you make it to like 2 years of consistently blogging, you start to build up this audience, and it starts to, like, that curve starts to go up, and pretty soon, like, after 3-4 years of being consistent, you start to, like, there's very, very few people that are willing to do that, and those are the people that end up building names and reputation. So it takes time, right? I mean, I can't give a magic bullet here. I can't say, man, if you just do these few marketing things, in 1 year you're going to be a famous software developer and make tons of money. But I can tell you, you got to start now. Like, the best time to plant a tree was, what was it, 10 years ago or whatever that.
Right. It's like starting your IRA, right?
Exactly. But if you start now and you can be consistent and you can be persistent, then what will happen is that if you can be the person that makes it 2 or 3 years, 4 years down the road, all of a sudden there's not going to be a lot of other people that hung with you. You're going to be alone in that race, or very, very, very little competition, and so you're going to get a majority of the visits. Like, you're going to start to get traffic. And when I've got a lot of students that go through my courses and through my coaching, and I've been doing it for long enough now to start seeing the results from different people. And some people get lucky and they get results right away. I mean, it's a rarity, but a majority of people that I've coached that have gone through this after a year, right? When I first started really encouraging people to write blogs, about after a year, that's when I started getting the emails coming in that said, hey, I'm finally getting traffic to my blog. Hey, I got this new job. Hey, this opportunity came. And it's because it's about a year. If you can keep it up for about a year, that's when you start to see any kind of result. You probably don't see anything for the first year. And then about 2 years, you see some definite results, but you got to be able to stick it out to make it that long. There's obviously techniques you can do to get traffic to your blog and to help to grow it, but the biggest thing is consistency and persistency.
Have you always been a person who had those traits, or were they things that you had to cultivate, or even realize that you were deficient in and somehow figure out how to achieve them?
So actually, my natural instinct is to be lazy.
Oh, good, I'm not alone.
My dad used to just harp on me because of how lazy I was. Right, just this kid will never amount. He was so worried I would never amount to nothing because I was just so dang lazy. But I've found, there's a lot of, you'll read a lot of business and management books that'll say, play to your strengths, and chart your strengths, and focus on your strengths, and ignore your weaknesses. I subscribe to a different philosophy. What I have found is that strengths, natural strength, tend to be taken for granted. So the things that we're naturally good at, we think, I'm good at drawing, I'm good at math, whatever it is, so we don't put a lot of work into them. So we start off with this advantage. Maybe we're +2, charisma, or +2 intelligence, whatever it is, right?
Good reference. Very well done. Yeah.
But what ends up happening is we we take that for granted, and then but then you have the things that we suck at that for me, I was lazy, right? I was unorganized, I was lazy, I was shy. Those are probably the three things that people would say, John, how is that possible? You're none of those things. Like, those are your strengths. It's because I put a lot of work into those things, and so I don't take them for granted, and I appreciate them. And so that's what, I find, not to say that you should just embrace your weaknesses, but what my whole point behind this is, the thing that you put the work into, that's the thing that is going to be the thing that you appreciate and that you eventually have the most success with. It doesn't matter if you started with a +2 intelligence, right? By the time you're level 50, that little advantage is negated out. Your equipment is much more important, right? The experience that you have is much more important, not the little stat. If you've ever played D&D, right? Some people obsessively roll their stats over, until they get their perfect. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter in the end. Like, at the beginning, sure, it makes a little bit of a difference, but later on, it doesn't matter in the end game. Later on, and it's the same thing I found in life. So yeah, I didn't start with those attributes. I chose what I wanted to become, and I tried to become that, and a lot of it was based on my weaknesses. So.
Wow, experience points matter more than initial rolls on the character.
Yep.
If you run into somebody who is in a situation where they're trying to get a job and they feel like they haven't done the blogging, are there any quick wins? And I'm not cheats, not hacks, but imagine you're going out, and there's a lot of people looking for work these days. I mean, there are places of the country where even being a developer is hard to find a job at. What do you recommend? Do you have any recommendations for what they can do to start creating or reinforcing a personal brand, besides investing a year, which they should have done a year ago, in writing a blog?
So there's a few things. I mean, one, if you're in this situation, there's a couple things you want to do. The first thing is you want to still lay this foundation. Like, I'm going to give you some quick fixes, but before I give you the quick fixes, I want to say, lay the foundation. Like, realize that you got yourself into a bad situation and try to make it so that you don't get yourself in that situation again. Okay. So that means, like, start doing the branding things, the long-term benefit things, now, and then also on the financial side, make it so. I mean, a lot of people are in a bind. They don't have freedom because they don't have some money saved up for you should have a couple of months of runway. Everyone should have a couple at minimum, right? I don't feel comfortable if I don't have a year worth of runway, but at least, like, do not live paycheck to paycheck. Have a couple of months of savings where you could live off of. So first of all, it's nice to be able to give your boss the finger if you need to.
Amen, brother.
Right?
Amen.
When I have 3 months of savings in my bank account, I can give my boss a finger if he tells me to do something unethical, or I just, or I just.
He treats you poorly, right?
Yeah.
And let me just chime in. I work with a lot of people that are freelancers or agency owners, and a lot of these people are taking gigs that they know are bad from the outset. And why? It's because they're cash poor and they make bad decisions that feed right back into that.
Right. It's just, it's like the whole thing with, especially if you're in debt, right? It's like this cycle, payday loan cycle, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, first start with those foundations. Realize that you need to have runway, because that makes it so you're not in desperate situation, and then also that you need long-term plans for your career, and you can't just quick fix your way out of things. So with that said, the number one thing that I would do, it's a bit of an investment, is I would go out right now and hire a professional resume writer to write my resume. Okay. This is well-spent money, because I get a little flack about this, but let me explain it this way. The CEO of the company you work for, he doesn't write code. Probably not, right? He hired you to write code. Why? Right? Because he's not a professional coder. Sure, he could crack open an IDE and learn how to write some JavaScript, but he gave the job of writing code to you and paid you money to do it because you're the professional at it. Now, are you a professional resume writer? No. Probably not, right? Like, how many resumes will you even write in your lifetime? Like, maybe 5 or maybe 10? I don't know. Like you're never going to be at the level of, you're not pouring your proficiency into that. So don't do that yourself. Hire someone who is really good at that to do that job for you, and that can make a huge, huge difference. This is your marketing material. This is your primary thing. Like, when you apply for a job, the primary thing that someone sees and they take 2 seconds to look at is your resume. So it's an ad for you. You want that ad to be as effective as possible. So hire someone who understands copywriting and advertising and can in the terms of the tech field and can get you the best chance of getting the interview. That's the number one thing that you can do. It's probably going to cost you $300 to $500 to get a good professional to write your resume, but it's a really, really good investment. It's going to make it much more likely that you're going to be able to get that job.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, we have about 15 minutes left. If there's folks who are watching live and you'd like to put your questions in the Q&A app in Google Hangout, we're happy to take those as well in the last 15 minutes. John, I want to talk to you about specialization.
Sure.
A lot of developers think about themselves in terms of the tool sets they use. I'm a Rails developer. I'm a JavaScript guy, a Java developer, but there's a ton of those out there. Is it important to specialize, especially as we start putting ourselves out there? For example, I always think about Bobby Flay, right? The chef. He can cook anything, but he seems to be this guy who loves hamburgers and American food, right? That's his thing. Is it important that we pick a specialization as we're embarking on this year of blogging?
Oh yeah, this is one of the most critical things, and one of the things that most people get wrong and they argue about. But this is so critical, right? It's counterintuitive, right? In fact, I just met a guy. I'm actually in a mastermind group with him. Who he's actually I'll advertise this thing at pyimagesearch.com. But Adrian, and he has a specialty of computer vision in Python.
I met him at MicroConf. He is absolutely brilliant. He's got his doctorate. I mean, the guy's amazing.
Yeah. So that's so I was like, when I first talked to him, I was like, and he's selling a product, right, on there. I'm like, you can't be selling a lot of that. I mean, how many people are visiting how many people are interested in computer vision in Python? That's a very small thing, and then how many of them will buy this book? He's doing fine. He's making a full-time income off of selling that book, right? So there's enough people that are interested in it. That's a very, very small niche. So yeah, most people aren't going to pick a niche that small, but you should. You should pick something very small like that because there is plenty of market for it. Like this is a big, big world, right? I'm not saying it's possible to pick a niche that's too small, but I still haven't seen the Android list view guy or gal, right? That's a great niche. Just focus on this one control that people have a lot of trouble with in Android, and write all about that and all the ways you can customize it. And I'll tell you what, you'll get invited to speak at conferences. You'll get to write a book on the subject. You could write magazine articles because you'll be such an expert in this very, very small area that when anyone searches for that, they're going to find your name. So the idea is that you want to be the big fish in the small pond when you're starting out, because that gives you that super advantage. I didn't do this starting out, right? I didn't realize the power of this, so it took me longer. And now people are like, well, John, you don't really specialize so much anymore. Yeah, that's right, because as you grow, you branch out and you take a bigger specialization. So maybe you start out with this really small niche, and then you can stay there if you want, but you can go bigger. You can become more generalist, and then because you're relying on your name, but you got it in order to build the name. You got to start out very, very, very specific, and that's a huge, huge advantage.
So you started out by doing soft skills for programmers, right? Which sounds like a specialization, but when you think about it, and I think this is what you're kind of saying, it's really not, right? You wrote a whole book on it, right? And is it soft skills for when you're managing people below you, for dealing with the client, for dealing with your boss, for dealing with executives? Is it soft skills for coaching other people? I mean, there's a million different ways that this concept of soft skills, it really is a really broad topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you seen anybody actually pick a niche that's too small? I mean, have you run into anybody who's like, I deal with green-eyed Java developers in North Dakota with size 9 shoes? Or really is it just practically impossible to pick a specialization that's too small?
I have not seen someone pick one that's too small yet. I'm sure that it's possible, but gosh, I've seen some weird things on the internet. There's people that, I mean, if you made a website, with about all about pink stuffed bunnies, you'd probably find a ton of people that you could actually make a full-time living selling material on that. I'm sure of it. This is how crazy it is, how big the world is. So it's really, really hard. A good example, just to kind of hit the point home, that I like to use is, and I use this example quite a bit, but let's say your garbage disposal breaks, right? So you go through you look for plumbers, and you see ABC Plumbing, you see Joe's Plumbing, and then you see Mr. Garbage Disposal Fix-It Man Plumbing Inc. Who do you call?
He's the guy I'm calling.
Not only do you call that guy, but he charges twice the rates. he can bill higher because everyone calls him for his garbage disposal. Now, he doesn't get the toilet overflow business, which he doesn't want anyway, but but he gets all the garbage disposal business, right? Because he's specifically niched down to that point. And so that's the whole thing, is like, especially if you're a freelancer, right? Even a career developer, who's going to work for someone else, if you are that specific thing that this client is looking for, you could get paid a very high rate. Think about specialists, doctors, brain surgeons, specialist doctors get paid more than general practitioners. Lawyers who specialize in a very, very specific area of law get to charge higher rates, and they're in higher demand. So this is something that I think a lot of people do not realize how powerful it is to pick a very, very specific niche.
Okay, it seems like there's a big chance I'm going to pick, my head and my heart fear I'm going to pick the wrong niche. But what you're saying is any niche will do, right?
Yeah.
Like, pick a niche and go for it. But is there some intellectual activity that it feels like I need to undertake, which is evaluating, somehow comparing should I be the Android guy for list view, or the iOS button guy, or the JavaScript of callback guy, right? I mean, yeah. Is it important that I go through the process of evaluating those, or is the most important thing for me to pick one and go down the road and just start doing something? Which way would you kind of, should I evaluate many possibilities or just charge forward with one of them?
So if you just said, I'm either going to waste a whole bunch of time and not do anything and just think about what I should do, or just pick a random niche and just go that direction, I would say pick the random thing and go. You're going to find success. It's like, think of it this way, right? When your car is parked in your driveway and you turn the steering wheel, right? You can change direction all you want, but you're not going anywhere. But if that car is moving and you steer, you could steer the wrong direction, but you could correct and you could move and you could go. You have to be going to get somewhere. And so that's the thing, is so many people, I feel like they're sitting in their driveway in their car, it's parked, they're like, should I turn the steering wheel this way? Should I turn it this way? I don't know. Maybe I don't want to go the wrong direction. And
right.
Like, well,
what if a car comes? I'm going to need, what if I encounter a kid on a bike? I'm going to have to do this, right?
Right.
Or like all these what if scenarios. What if there's construction?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a mentor in Brennan's Double Your Freelancing clients class, and one of the first exercises we go through is pick a niche. And people it's so hard. I can just tell you, I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
And a niche is not the tool you love unless you're willing to teach all about it and just be all about that tool guy. But if being a Rails developer in 2015, that's not a niche in my mind. You can't.
Right. No, that's too broad.
That's not it.
Yeah.
It's too broad, right?
Yeah.
You have to be the Stripe Rails integration guy, or something that you imagine most 90% of the people you meet will have never heard of that. Then you're starting to probably specialize enough.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the key. So again, if you're going to take action, don't be paralyzed by fear, right? It doesn't mean that you can't evaluate things, right? It depends on what your goal is. If you're a career developer and you're in Wisconsin and you have so many employers, you're probably going to, and you don't want to move, you probably are going to have to pick a niche that's probably going to work with somewhere that you could get hired there in that area.
Sure.
Let's be practical, right? But if you're a freelancer and you're trying to build the highest hourly rate, then you might want to look and see where things are going and where there's demand in the future. Or if you're trying to sell a product, you might not want to pick a niche that is one that appeals to just poor college students, because
they have no money. They're
exactly.
poor.
So there's some considerations, but you can always change direction, and building a name. like even if you pick the wrong niche, you can switch and the name still stays. Bo knows baseball, Bo knows football, right?
Right, that's a
Right.
great point.
And you look at a bunch of celebrities, and it's like, they have perfume lines. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? Or clothing lines, and it's like, well, because they built the name, so now they can do whatever the hell they want. And you could do the same thing. It's like a friend of mine, John Papa, he was the Silverlight guy, and if you know about Silverlight, it doesn't exist anymore. Now he didn't say, oh man, I picked the wrong niche. I better just give up and become become a whatever, you switch professions. He just switched into another niche. He went into single page applications, and now he's doing a lot of Angular stuff, and his name carried over. He already had reputation. He had people following him.
He didn't become Mr. Plumber guy, or he didn't have to go back to school to be a bricklayer, or that's good.
Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. John, can you give us some success stories? Like, what have you seen where this is actually not theoretically, but dramatically improved or changed people's lives? Like, can you give us something to inspire us?
Sure. Let me see. The one that sticks out of my mind right now, because I just interviewed him talking about the success story, is this. I can never get those Italian names. Joe Coliantonio.
Nice.
He has a site called Test Talks. At testtalks.com, and a podcast, and I started working with him. I did a little bit of coaching with him, and he was following my stuff. I think it's been over a year, maybe about a year and a half. And when he started out, he had a little bit of a blog doing automation stuff, and he didn't really have much traction on that. But he's been like, emailing me like, man, I want to apply this. He's been working on building consistency. He created a podcast. And he's now at this point where he's kind of built up a nice authority. He's getting like several thousand visitors to his blog per day, and he's got sponsors that are paying him money to do his podcast. So he's in this point where I was just talking to him in the interview, and I was like, what's changed for you? And he said, well, when I first started my blog, I was afraid of jobs. I was like, well, what happens if I lose this job? I need something else to fall back on. And now he's like, I'm like, if I lost the job that I'm working at now, I could get a job in like 2 seconds. I could send out a tweet or an email, and I would have offers. I would have multiple offers. And he's like, so for him, he really transformed from being unsure and not being sure of his job security to this point where not only is he super secure in his job. I mean, he talk about someone who could give his boss a finger. He could do that, and he's working. Certainly, his values and principle. He owns himself, right? And he's making side money from this, where he could potentially make a full-time income from doing his blogging and his podcast, and now he's got like just a ton of opportunities that are lined up for him. So there's a huge, he's built up a name, he's built up a reputation. He could make high into the six-figure income, probably really high up in there, just as like as an employee, or he could go and freelance and consult for several $100 an hour. I'm sure that he could bill a couple $100 an hour rate easily, and he's also got a business going now that he has multiple paths. His future is very open to him now.
So in the same way as the guy that is the trapeze artist or the tightrope walker looks brave and confident, it's because he's got the safety net. It's because he's got something. He doesn't just have one option, so he hangs on for dear life. He actually expresses himself. He's confident, and I mean, that sounds like it makes all the difference, is having those kinds of choices in life.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it really does. Like you don't realize, it's you don't want to. The worst position to be put in is what's called the squeeze, right? it's where you suddenly have to you're forced because of some situation to make a non-optimal choice, and that happens when your resources are constrained, when you don't have a lot of options, and a lot of people get stuck, and that's how we get stuck in these dead-end jobs for the next 10 or 20 years, and like we wonder how things got so bad, is because we didn't create these options for ourselves. So that's the biggest thing, is like if you market yourself, if you build a brand, you create tons of options for yourself, so you're never stuck in that squeeze position where your boss. How many people have I gotten emails from where they're like, man, my boss yells at me and and like basically almost physically abuses me, and I'm like, get out and tell him to screw himself, like get out of there. And they're like, no, I got a family, I got kids, I don't have any other job prospects. I'm like, wow, man, you got yourself in a bad position. Like, get yourself out of the bad position, and then tell your boss to screw off, and don't ever let yourself be in a situation where you're abused at work. But you know, that's the key. So
Yeah. Well, John, where can people find you and find out more about this?
So easiest place to find me is at simpleprogrammer.com. So you can go there and you can find my blog, and I've got all YouTube videos and everything. Also, if your viewers are interested, I've got my course on how to market yourself as a software developer. It's like 4 books, 2 video courses, and a bunch of interviews. Like I've got Bob Martin, Scott Hanselman, not Scott Hanselman. I got Jeff Atwood on there, a couple other big names, and you can find that at devcareerboost.com.
devcareerboost.com. Anything exciting that you're planning for 2015 that we should know about?
I'm trying to think. Well, the biggest thing that I'm doing, I'm working on the audio version of Soft Skills. Right now,
Okay.
I've been recording that now. I just realized that when you write a 504-page book, that means that you have to now record the audio. Takes a lot longer than it.
I bet. I bet.
And then I'm actually I'm expanding Simple Programmer. I'm looking for writers. I'm going to make it more than me. I'm taking this to the next level to make this so that I really want to expand this out and teach more people to do what I'm doing, to teach soft skills, and to give the opportunity to write about that and to reach more people, because I really want to take this to the higher level now.
So if somebody is committing themselves to doing this, is writing for you, and they have some work to show, is writing for you a way for them to get build their own brand as well as assist you?
Exactly. Yep. It's a good opportunity. If you go to simpleprogrammer.com/jobs, I'm also looking for an editor, and basically, it's a good. I get about 150,000, 200,000 page views a month, so it's pretty high exposure. If you want, but I'm looking for very quality, writing, and some dedicated writers who are willing to make an investment in order to start building up their brand through my blog. So.
Awesome. John Sonmez has been with us today. John, thank you so much. It's just been a ton of fun. I really appreciate all the work that you do. And on behalf of developers everywhere who are abused, we thank you that you're giving us a way out.
All right. Thanks. It was a lot of fun. Glad to do it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.